Good evening. This is the I-24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Arish, and these are the headlines. The IDF kills a suspected Palestinian terrorist in the West Bank city of Birzeit, and clashes ensue at Birzeit University and the Temple Mount. The United Nations nuclear watchdog reportedly halted a major report on Iran's nuclear project in the name of diplomacy. And an intense day in Ukraine and the region after dozens of pro-Russian gunmen seized government buildings, and the Russian army goes on high alert. Good evening again. A wanted Palestinian was killed today during an Israeli raid on his home in the West Bank. At the same time, clashes broke out for the second time this week on Temple Mount as tensions rise throughout the country. I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblizer reports.
Tensions have once again boiled over in the increasingly turbulent West Bank. Israeli security forces shot dead a wanted Palestinian in Birzeit, located near Ramallah and under full Palestinian jurisdiction, after he ignored repeated calls to surrender.
The soldiers came at 6 in the morning and asked that the house be emptied. One man came out to speak to them, but he was thrown to the ground and hit. For 2 hours, the soldiers were throwing tear gas canisters and demanding people come out. They then stormed the house.
The Palestinian Authority was quick to condemn the killing, but Israeli military sources say the primary target was affiliated with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and partook in a series of terror attacks across the West Bank. 2 other suspects were arrested in the raid, which ended with Israeli forces bulldozing part of the building.
After the suspect was called to turn himself in, he barricaded himself inside his house, effectively resisting arrest. Forces used different means in order to complete the arrest, including live fire. The suspect was found dead, and in his residence an AK-47 assault rifle was uncovered.
In the aftermath, an estimated 150 Palestinians clashed with IDF soldiers who responded with non-lethal dispersal methods. Meanwhile, violence also erupted on Jerusalem's Temple Mount for the second time this week. The turmoil comes in the wake of an Israeli parliament debate over the status of the holy site, which has been jointly administered by Jordan and the Waqf Muslim Religious Trust since 1967. Following angry political reactions throughout the Arab world, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made clear that his government has no intention of changing the prevailing status quo.
And joining me right now in the studio is Amir Oren, defense analyst at Haaretz newspaper. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming.
Good evening, Lucy.
What went wrong in the last mission in Birzeit? If something went wrong.
The Birzeit operation started because a few days ago, in midweek, there was an attack by anonymous gunners on an army outpost near Birzeit, and the infantry soldiers manning this outpost were shot at by these assailants. Then the defense forces and the security service started looking for these assailants, and apparently last night they found 3 suspects. 2 of them gave themselves up. The third one was in that house. They called on him to come out. He did not respond. Then they shot at the house. They shot an anti-tank rocket, which apparently caused this destruction. Yeah. He still, of course, did not respond. And when they stormed the house, they found him dead. So people now expect some violence tomorrow. First of all, because of the funeral and the mourning, and then because it is Friday, and Friday is always more prone to violent demonstrations.
Is these kind of missions are something common for the IDF to do in the West Bank, in Palestinian territories?
Yes, they are common, and each morning the Israeli Defense Forces put out a bulletin detailing how many such nightly arrests took place. However, it is not common for such an operation to take place so shortly after a Palestinian attack on an Israeli post. So this time it was very fast, and apparently there was not enough time to flush out the suspect by other means.
Yeah. Well, like we're saying, it's the Middle East, it's the West Bank. 1 + 1 never is 2. Amir Horn.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to meet President Obama, and tensions are rising both between Israelis and Palestinians and among Israelis and themselves.
Yes, Amir Horn, thank you very much for this. Another demanding report about Israeli military conduct in the West Bank from Amnesty International, which goes so far as to accuse IDF soldiers of willful killings amounting to war crimes. Amnesty calls on the international community to suspend transferring arms to Israel. Israel was quick to respond, saying that the report smacks of bias, discrimination, and racism. For its part, the IDF said that Amnesty was ignoring the substantial increase in Palestinian violence in the last year. And joining me right now via Skype is Colonel Richard Camp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Colonel Camp, as an ex-military man in a high command, do you think that the IDF employs excessive use of force in the West Bank?
Well, not from what I've seen. I know many commanders and soldiers in the IDF. I've seen them operate. I've been to the West Bank myself, and certainly I've seen no indication of heavy-handed behavior. That's not to say it doesn't happen sometimes. In every army, you get soldiers who go beyond what they're supposed to do, who step out of line, and who sometimes in very high-pressure situations do behave in a way that their commanders wouldn't necessarily want them to behave. But I do think this Amnesty International report it's an amazingly biased document for an organization that purports to be impartial. It essentially almost dismisses the seriousness of some of the disturbances and deliberate violent assaults that the IDF face in the West Bank, and focuses solely on accusations made, unsubstantiated accusations in the main, made by Palestinian citizens against the elite.
Colonel Camp, we know that in the West Bank there is a complex situation when the army is engaged daily within a civil society similar to the NATO troops in Afghanistan. How should an army behave in this kind of situation?
Well, I think it is a very difficult situation. The army has to behave, whoever's national army it is, and the armies of Britain, the United States, Israel, France, very similar military forces, very similar levels of discipline, very similar standards imposed upon them. They have to behave with great restraint. They're sometimes subject to immense provocation. And of course, in the West Bank, the provocation that they face is bred into the people, the civilian population, very often the children, by incitement to hate, which appears in school textbooks and in even some official Palestinian Authority broadcasting and messages. So they're facing a situation where they're under great stress, great provocation, but there has to be immense restraint. And I believe that the IDF, like the British forces, of course, they've sometimes made mistakes, sometimes done the wrong thing. But I think on the whole, from what I've seen, certainly their behavior is reasonable and proportionate to the circumstances they face.
Yes, Colonel Richard Camp, thank you very much for this. U.S. President Barack Obama is scheduled to host Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Washington on March 17. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority President was reportedly angered last week during meetings in Paris with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry over proposals for a framework peace agreement with Israel. Abbas even threatened to hold talks with Israel after learning that the U.S. drafted document called to designate the neighborhood of Beit Hanina and not the whole of East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. And joining me now is Munir Zghayir, spokesman for the Palestinian Prisoners Families Association. Good evening. We have to say that Chief PA negotiator Saib Arikat rejected today the possibility of extending the April deadline for completing the peace talks with Israel. Let me ask you, what do you think caused him to actually do and say this?
You know that the Palestinian Authority right now, as Fatah in Ramallah, in front of Hamas in Gaza, the way that Hamas doesn't believe and doesn't trust that Israel going to give. So in this point, they saw themselves something like a joke in the middle of this negotiation. Why? Because there is something have to be negotiated as what the Oslo used to be. When they went to the negotiation, they know that there is things that they must not negotiate, like Jerusalem, the border of 67. The whole world decided this is an occupation, and the border of 67 have to be back under the Palestinian future state and the real future. So when Mr. Saeb Erekat see that he heard from most of the Palestinian parties that he's like somebody who's playing in the water and doing nothing after 20 years of negotiation, I guess they have to
But you know,
stop.
this is a framework, and there is a scheduled time to reach a framework agreement with Israel. And we know that John Kerry, Secretary John Kerry, is not going to actually back down from his demands from the Israeli side and from the Palestinian side.
Yeah, but Mr. Kerry, he bring us as a Palestinian something like what we call it in the cold winter time, something like a coat, a jacket. And he said, this is the jacket that Israel had made for you as a Palestinian, and you have to wear it, even if it's tight, even if it's too wide, even if the color is not comfortable. And nobody and the Palestinian people will accept that, because we have something, we have to have it, that the occupation have to be ended. This is the last occupation in the world. And Mr. Abbas and the martyr, Mr. Arafat, when they came in over here, all the world knows that they throw the weapons on the side, outside, and they throw the flights.
It's not so correct.
And they came in and they said, we don't want to see blood in both people. We don't want to see killing in both people.
Of course.
Why don't we respect this thing and we go the right way? We have 5 million Palestinians,
I have to finish.
6 million Israelis.
I have to finish. Munir Zahir, thank you very much for this.
Okay, you're welcome.
One of the Israeli Prime Minister's core demands for any future peace deal is Palestinian recognition of the Jewish state of Israel. But what exactly does this mean? I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev takes an extra look at the notion of Israel as a Jewish state.
It's one of the most complicated issues in Israel's history, and one of the Israeli Prime Minister's favorites.
We are the Jewish people. This is the Jewish land. This is the Jewish state.
In recent years, recognition of the Jewish nature of Israel has become a core demand for any peace deal with the Palestinians, and one of the sticking points in the latest U.S. efforts to reach a framework agreement. Netanyahu insists this is a crucial test of the Palestinians' genuine will for peace. Alas, his demand has been embraced by the U.S., but rejected again and again in Ramallah.
One should ask himself why the Palestinians are rejecting any kind of recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, because a peace, when one side is not recognizing the other side, it's not a real peace.
Netanyahu has insisted on a tough stand from the Palestinians, but even inside Israel, it does not have legal backing, and it raises complex questions about the balance between the state's Jewish and democratic values. Israel's 1948 Declaration of Independence refers to the land of Israel as the birthplace of the Jewish people, but the Jewishness of the state was never anchored by law. Several legislation efforts were initiated over the years on the topic, but none matured into a vote. The notion is currently being explored again, and a conference on the issue this week had wide representation from all of the coalition parties.
We are not Sweden. We are a state of a nation that was here 3,800 years ago. We are part of a historical chain, and we will continue it forever.
Netanyahu's demand does have its oppositions. The left is concerned by the implications for the Arab minority and blames Netanyahu for complicating negotiations. In order to maintain a Jewish state, they say, one doesn't need the law, but to withdraw to 1967 borderlines. The right, too, see it as a tactical trick aimed at winning support for other concessions.
Israel is challenging today a new phenomena of delegitimation overboard, and part of the questions, part of the challenges that Israel is facing is the fact that there are people that think that the Jewish state should not exist anymore.
The vivid debate involves unique notions of identity stemming from Judaism. What does it mean to be a Jew? Is it a religion or a nation, or maybe a culture? Perhaps that's the reason it's an issue that's been without a solution for far too long.
An increasingly hostile rhetoric from Hezbollah after an alleged air raid on its arms convoy Monday night. Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah has reportedly warned personnel of a possible war with Israel. Meanwhile, the Lebanese channel LBC reported that a Hezbollah field commander was killed in recent days. Security officials speculated that the militant was killed in one of the alleged Israeli airstrikes on Monday. Israel put its troops on the northern border on high alert after Hezbollah threatened retaliation for the airstrike. And as Israel's northern front is in the headlines again, in a rare event, the Israeli Navy allowed reporters to visit its upcoming submarine base in Haifa. Here's what the commander of the Haifa naval base had to say about Hezbollah.
The efforts of the organizations, including Hezbollah, to get their hands on weapons are not ceasing, and we are obliged to deal with their desire.
And more on the Northern Naval Front tonight on I-24 News Defense Weekly magazine right after us at 9:40 GMT. A Reuters exclusive reveals that the UN nuclear watchdog planned a major report on Iran, likely with more details on suspected bomb researched, but stopped its release as Tehran's diplomatic relations with the outside world improved. And joining me right now is Iranian politics lecturer at the IDC, Mayor Javed Anfar. Good evening.
Good evening.
What does it say about the watchdog?
It's very bad. They're playing politics. It's very bad. This is very bad. I mean, they should be releasing reports based on what they see and what they find. I don't think they should be revealing reports to improve situation or withholding reports to improve situations. Here they're trying to not to damage the current rapprochement we see. That's not their job. Their job is to report the facts.
Can we say that it's a big win for Iran?
You could say that I think it's a bigger loss for the IAEA, but of course it's a big win for Rouhani. This would have put him in a weaker position abroad, and it could have perhaps boosted the chances that new sanctions will be imposed against Iran, something that could have derailed the current negotiation process. Again, this is a situation that shouldn't be in the hands of the IAEA. The IAEA should be reporting things as it sees them, not be withholding reports.
So who is playing for who?
I think the IAEA here is trying to make sure, because there are people who want to impose tougher sanctions against Iran. And the concern, and I have that concern, that tougher sanctions would actually, at this point, derail the talks. And I think they are trying to make sure that the talks with Iran don't collapse. Because if they would have released those reports, that could have strengthened the sanctions camp. However, at the end of the day, again, this is a call that is not up to them to make. It should be up to them.
Nobody's going to actually investigate more in this report?
I think first of all, it's been exposed. Now that it's been exposed, I think it's going to make it difficult to ignore such talks and such reports. And I don't think the IAEA were going to ignore it. They just didn't want to release it at this point. I think this brings us back to the point that no agreement with Iran will be worth the paper it's written on if it doesn't include the Iranian government answering all questions about suspected military activity in the past, activity which now is even more suspicious than before.
But wouldn't it be right now the best time to release it?
I think any time should be released any time. But again, I'm not saying that new sanctions against Iran would be good. I would be against that. But at the same time, I'm against withholding such information. If there's information, by the way, that's found that Iran is completely innocent, and if they hold it back because they want it, that would also be wrong. Facts should be presented on time, regardless of what they say.
Mayor Javed Anfar. And you, of course, will be updating us about that. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
And still to come on this evening edition. An intense day in Ukraine and the region after dozens of pro-Russian gunmen seized government buildings, and the Russian army goes on high alert. And Israel and Japan find common ground over the diary of Anna Frank. Don't go anywhere. 2 minutes break, and I'll be back. Welcome back. The controversy in Ukraine continues. A group of gunmen captured the regional government building in Crimea, demanding a separation from the country. NATO defense ministers held a special meeting today about the issue and urged Russia not to take action that would escalate tension in Ukraine. Meanwhile, former President Viktor Yanukovych announced he will give a press conference in Russia tomorrow. I-24 News reporter Uri Shapiro has more.
Almost a week after the Ukrainian people managed to topple Yanukovych administration, Ukrainians are facing another battle towards separation from the Crimean Peninsula and increasing threats of military involvement from Russia.
I would like to address the leadership of the Russian Federation with regard to abiding by basic agreements about the Russian military presence in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, and about unacceptability of violating the Ukrainian laws.
Dozens of pro-Russian supporters seized the local parliament house in Crimean capital of Simferopol on Tuesday, calling for a referendum that will lead the way to separation from Ukraine. Now, the gap between Russian-dominated Crimea and the newly appointed pro-European government seems larger than ever.
I was born here, and I could say that I'm not necessarily Ukrainian. I am in fact a Crimean. My parents lived and still live here, and I don't want the things that happened on Maidan to happen here. And I want Crimea to either accept the 1994 Constitution or join Russia.
The confusion continues in Ukraine as former President Viktor Yanukovych allegedly declared to Russian media that he left Ukraine but still sees himself as the leader of the country. Meanwhile, many are concerned with the latest Russian involvement in the region. Russian news agency Interfax reported that Russia placed bomber jets along the Ukrainian border on high alert.
I expect Russia to be transparent about these activities, and I urge them not to take any steps that could be misinterpreted or lead to miscalculation during a very delicate time.
With Russian threats to attack from the north and the Crimean Peninsula in the south threatening to separate, it's no wonder the new government may feel insecure. Now Ukrainians are waiting to open a new chapter on May 25th, when said elections may determine the future.
And joining me from Kiev is Oleg Rybachuk, former chief of staff to President Yushchenko. Good evening. Thank you very much for this phone call.
Good evening.
So do you think that there is a substantial, realistic chance that Ukraine, as we know it, will split to two different nations?
No, I don't think so. This is not in the interest of prominent politicians. Absolute majority of the party of the region just condemned their ex-leader, President Yanukovych, for the crimes and for corruption, and now they voted today overwhelmingly to support new government. Then it is not in the interest of the richest Ukrainians, and all top oligarchs, what we call them, top richest Ukrainians, clearly voiced out their concern, and they said that there would be no separation of the country. It is not primarily in their business interest. Forget about other things. So I don't think this scenario has a good perspective.
And what about the Russian side?
Oh, Russian side is there, that's true. And Crimean card probably is the last card Mr. Putin is playing. But again, it's not so simple and so easy. It's not Georgia where you can play the game with giving lots of passports to citizens. They try to do the same in Crimea, but even the Russians politicians are concerned about that. So all these military exercises near the border, historical statements of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they say that Russia actually is losing the nerve and has no well-thought policy. I think that Russia is very much interested to play a role in the civilized world. It is not in their interest to become an outcast of Europe with this unpredictable behavior. Still, this is 21st century and the world has changed. And in Europe, you can't expect open military conflict between two big countries.
Mr. Rybachuk, do you feel the threats from Russia on the ground?
No, I don't think Russia is actually going to use its military, ground military forces to invade or to provoke any conflicts. Russia is playing some strange games like, for example, giving command, and we saw armed personnel carriers in Crimea traveling beyond the stipulated by our agreement borders, which the acting president of Ukraine, which is Mr. Turchinov, called an act of open aggression. But after that statement, Russia has withdrawn. So I think that after some nervous exchange of statements, situation will come down, because it is in the interest of no one. Russia can no chance to get a winner out of this situation. Moreover, Putin may get very serious problems on his own territory, which he had already.
Yes, Mr. Oleg Rybachuk, thank you very much for this. And on Wednesday, a federal judge in Texas ruled the state's prohibition of same-sex marriage unconstitutional, while Arizona's state governor decided to veto a pending bill that could have allowed discrimination against the state's LGBT community. I-24 News reporter Roni Bembassa takes a look at these latest developments.
The past 24 hours have marked another step towards gay equality in the United States. Only a week after a controversial anti-gay bill passed the Arizona state legislature, the state's governor, Jan Brewer, decided not to sign it into law.
After weighing all of the arguments, I have vetoed Senate Bill 1062 moments ago.
The bill would have allowed business owners to cite their own religious beliefs as legal grounds for refusing to serve same-sex couples, a possible license to discriminate against gays in the name of religion. Veto this bill! Since the bill passed, Brewer had been under pressure to reject it, after a number of major business organizations and politicians of both major parties came out against it.
I have not heard of one example in Arizona where a business owner's religious liberty has been violated. The bill is broadly worded and could result in unintended and negative consequences.
The governor's step is a significant win for gay rights advocates in the conservative U.S. state, after similar bills were introduced in a number of other states, including Ohio, Mississippi, and Oklahoma, but failed to pass the House. On the same day, another important development in Texas, after a federal judge ruled the state's ban on same-sex marriage unconstitutional. The decision came as a result of a petition filed by two gay couples asking for recognition by the state.
We look forward to the day when, after 17 years, almost 17 years, we can finally be married.
U.S. federal judges have issued similar rulings in Utah, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Virginia, once again sparking debate over federal versus state jurisdiction. The United States is considered a leading country in matters of liberalism and equality, but is also home to deeply religious and conservative communities, making the struggle over gay equality a highly divisive subject even in 2014.
After hundreds of Anne Frank-related books were found vandalized in Japan, Israel's embassy has donated copies of the teenager's diary to libraries in Tokyo. Motivation for the attacks remain a mystery in a country known to be supportive of the Holocaust diary. I-24 News correspondent Shahar Peled has the story.
300 copies of Anne Frank's diaries were given today to Japan as a gift from Israel. They were presented as replacements to the hundreds of books depicting the famous Holocaust story, which were vandalized in multiple libraries across Tokyo last week.
The reaction in Israel was of surprise, because the relations with Japan and with the Japanese people are so warm, so it was really surprising, but I think that everybody understood that it's a single act that doesn't represent the Japanese people.
Anne Frank, a German Jew born in 1929, documented her family's experiences hiding in concealed rooms during the German occupation of the Netherlands. Although Frank's story has been extremely popular in Japan, where even comic books and cartoons reviving her short life were created, at least 308 copies of the diary had been torn.
This book was in the culture section. Some others were in the children's book section. Books related to Anne Frank were all over the library. It means that the person who did this planned it thoroughly. They were acting under strong motives.
While one book was damaged, on the other side of the ocean, another, alarmingly different, was put up for auction. autographed copies of Adolf Hitler's manifesto Mein Kampf are set to go under the hammer in Los Angeles. Although Nazi memorabilia trade usually generates grave criticism, Jewish auctioneer Nate Sanders doesn't seem to be bothered.
A lot of Jewish people collect World War II memorabilia. A lot of people collect World War II memorabilia. This fits in all those genres. It's very evil items. I'm Jewish. I think it's very heinous, but it is an auction item, it is a memento, it's a piece of memorabilia and a piece of history.
70 years later, World War II literature continues to fascinate the world and generate action. Time will tell whether the acts of destruction and Holocaust denial will prevail, or rather the preservation of the symbols of human suffering.
We're moving back to Israel. After guarding Ehud Olmert's secrets for years, his loyal bureau chief Shula Zaken has offered to testify against the former Israeli prime minister in the Holy Land case. I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg digs into the complicated political drama.
The road to power is paved with hypocrisy and casualties.
It may seem like part of a House of Cards plot, but this political drama is actually happening. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's closest and most loyal ally, Shula Zaken, also his longtime bureau chief, has offered to testify against him in a corruption case in exchange for a latent plea bargain. Zaken has worked for Olmert since she was 17, when she was hired by the law firm Olmert established. Her loyalty remained unshaken even when she became his co-defendant in an earlier criminal case that forced Olmert to resign as prime minister in 2008. The Jerusalem corruption trial involved a variety of scandals connected to Olmert, but he was acquitted of most charges. The Holy Land trial, which is close to an end, deals with a massive bribery and fraud scheme. Zaken is expected to be convicted of minor charges in the Holy Land trial and possibly the major charge of bribery, which could carry jail time. Most people involved in the Holy Land case say Zaken's refusal to testify, either to police or in court, was meant primarily to protect Olmert, and that her silence hurt her. It has increasingly strained the relationship, as Zaken felt Olmert was deliberately trying to shift the blame to her. At one point, she was so angered by his testimony, she stormed out of the courtroom. Numerous media reports say Zaken's attorneys made the proposal to the prosecution, but prosecutors have doubts about the feasibility of signing a plea bargain so late in the game, when the trial is almost over. They also have doubts on whether the judge would believe Zaken's revised story, and they think the case is solid enough even without her testimony. On the other hand, the prosecution would like to hear what she has to say. Her testimony, after years of closely guarding her ex-boss's secrets, could have major public importance. Olmert responded to the report, saying that, if true, the news shows the weakness in the state's case. And yet again, reality sometimes can give fantasy a run for its money.
When the money's coming your way, you don't ask any questions.
Yeah, the Israeli House of Cards version. Joining me now for the week's headline you may have missed is I-24 News media correspondent Anthony Grant. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
So you have some headlines that we missed.
Yeah, here's one that actually I missed at first. I had to do a double take when I saw it, from Le Matin, which is a newspaper in Algeria. And Algeria, of course, is a huge country with a lot of important resources. And the headline in this article in French says, Algeria is on the brink of catastrophic revolt. Now, that's pretty severe.
It's pretty severe.
Yeah. Now, you could say this is...
But surprising, can we say?
Well, the context here is that, now this is a bit of an opinion piece that kind of blends into news opinion here, but this is in response to the announcement that Bouteflika, president there, has announced that he's going to be running for president for a fourth term on April 17th, despite the fact that he recently had a stroke. Very controversial. So the writer here is pretty outspoken, which is pretty brave, considering the state of freedom of the press in Algeria, is saying that...
So you're saying basically another place to open our eyes.
He's saying that people are fed up, so look out in the weeks ahead in Algeria. So,
and we're moving to the New York Times.
The New York Times, which has on their Sinosphere blog this headline: journalists fear attack on Hong Kong editor won't be solved. The backstory here is that The editor of a prominent paper called Ming Pao was dismissed from the paper after he had investigated a murder of a dissident on the Chinese mainland. That prompted outrage amongst the journalist community in Hong Kong. So shortly after this manifestation of protest, he was attacked on in what has been called a triad hit by the South China Morning Post. And there's a very poor record of people being held to account and attackers being found when it comes to muffling journalists' opinion.
It's a very worrying case, I have to say.
Yeah, it's not easy to see that happen.
And if we're talking about China,
South China Morning Post, which I just referenced, of course, says that an article about a Chinese naval admiral has said that smog would be China's top defense against U.S. laser weapons, which are deployed now on certain U.S. war vessels.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, of course, it's been a very nasty week for pollution in China, and this guy in China has taken some heat for those comments because they're actually he was meant it, although he claims they were taken out of context. So. I don't know. Laser, smog. It sounds like a video game, but this is real stuff.
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Let's
say
move on to
anything about
Scotland.
It. Yes. Let's go to Scotland.
The Telegraph. Prospect of independence is already damaging the Scottish economy. There's a referendum coming up in September about Scottish independence, and it's already frightening off investors. So. Yeah, just when you thought the world wasn't any more unstable, you have to worry about Scotland detaching from the United Kingdom. So that's one to watch. David Bowie actually came out in favor of Scotland staying with the UK. So the debate is heating up.
It's heating up.
Yes.
So we're moving to Los Angeles Times.
Oscar mania is heating up. Of course, the 86th Oscar ceremonies are coming up on Sunday, and the big buzz is about Judy Garland's offspring, including Liza Minnelli, Lorna Luft, Joey Luft, who are going to be doing a commemoration to the 75th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz is coinciding with these Oscars. So these famous progeny of one of the biggest Hollywood legends of all time, they're going to be doing something festive for the Oscar ceremony.
This is going to be very, very,
very big.
Very big, yes.
And
yes.
If there's time for something in France?
No, unfortunately, we don't have, but you will be here next week.
France is always in our heart.
Yeah. France is always
in
our hearts. Thank you very much for this. Thank you. And still ahead on this I-24 News Evening Edition. The Daily Debate, a scathing Amnesty International report criticizes IDF actions in the West Bank, and the Israeli military issues a clear response. Where does the truth lie? And on one behind the mysterious and powerful Jerusalem syndrome. For now, I don't have any syndrome, but we're going out for 2 minutes break, and then we will be back for the I-24 News Daily Debate. Don't go anywhere.